You're listening to We All Go Forward, a podcast on self-leadership through setbacks. With ownership, action, and growth, be set back, only to be catapulted forward into a more progressed, truer you.
Hello, everyone. So in today's episode, we are talking about the topic of love, parenting, and marriage. So the truth is, relationships can make or break our lives. Time after time, we have witnessed that who we partner up with greatly impacts where we land in life. So in a life of inevitable setbacks, why choose deliberate ones? Of course, not every person or every situation shows up with glaring signs that they are indeed unsafe or unhealthy, but there are signs, and often we ignore them in the name of love. We don't realize that we can love or feel like we're loving unhelpful and unhealthy things or people, often with the frame of thought to change it until it ends up changing us. In this episode, we sit with wife, mom, nurse, blogger, and podcaster, Hesdie Josias. If experience is our resume, her resume includes one of single motherhood, finding love, introducing step parenting to her child, and blended families. Join us on this convo of love, parenting, and marriage, of how we can have setbacks in each scenario, but it's up to us to decide how we'll progress and if we're worthy of it. So at this time, I just want to welcome Hesdie. Hey, Hesdie.
Hey. Yay.
How are you?
I'm doing so well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for being here. Oh my gosh. I won't even go into it, but y'all, to the listeners, me and Hesdie had a whole time getting together.
We did. And we did.
And we did. But we are here, and that's all that matters, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What's funny is that, so I'll tell you, I think I did share this, but you were actually the first person that came to mind when I thought of who can I interview that I know, right?
Really?
It's true. So it's like, on one end, I had like my first topic in mind, which was the identity topic. And on another end, I had a first person in mind, which was you. So I ended up finding the person for the identity topic that went well. And then I think for you, we were trying to find and land in the right place of a topic. But I don't want you to think it's because like I found you like, oh, if I'm thinking about setbacks, I'm thinking about Hesdie. Nope.
Right.
On the contrary, the reason why you came to my mind first is because to me, like, I feel like you're known for overcoming. You're known for setting your own pace. I love your insights. I think you're known for your insights. You're known for your positivity, your transparency. So those are all things that to me you're known for. And so I think in that way, it just became like there's so many places we can go with this, but I think we found a really great topic. Nice. Okay. So before we get ahead of ourselves, I like to start off with what I say, like, just a little warm up questions here and there. And so I wanted to ask you, how's your family? Caramel Man, that's how I know him. I think that's how the world knows him, and the boys. But yes, tell us about your beautiful family, as much as you like, or as little as you like.
Right. So Caramel Man is just the most consistent thing. Praise God for that.
Oh,
yeah, he's just like, even my therapist, she's like, you know what? As many years that we've been doing this, he's the only thing you don't complain about. I'm like, that's all I got. That's it.
Wow.
Yeah. He's very briefly mentioned. So he's a constant. So I am thankful for that. As far as these kids, well, the big one, that's what I call him when they're working my nerves. The big one, he's doing his big one things. So, teenager, high school, everything that comes with that. So, just a lot of prayers, send some positive energy my way.
Yes. I've been hearing that a lot from parents of teens.
But that's another conversation. See, that's a segment in and of itself.
Another time.
Absolutely. My baby boy, he's just the sweetest thing alive. And he just, he kind of like rejuvenates my my wanting to be a parent. So he reminds me that it's still worth it.
Yeah.
Probably shouldn't pack up and leave or nothing like that, So Yeah, we just having a good old time over here.
Wait a second. So how old is Charlie now? Because you make posts and I just don't believe you when you're showing this grown person. I just
Right.
don't believe you. So how old
So
is this man?
this
Man.
man is 14
Mm.
and he's taller than I am. His voice is extra deep and he's just basking in his own glory. So yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, you're gonna have to give me we're gonna circle back to this topic because I'm about 2 years from having a teenager and I'm still in
Yeah.
this belief.
Hold on
Of
tight.
So in that case, you have what is known as, and this we're going to get into this conversation, but you have what is known as a blended family.
Yes.
Um, how would you say like your experiences with that? There's two sides to every coin. What would you say the two sides to the blended family coin are?
I would say the two sides would be the side where you think you're super prepared and you totally got this because you've checked all the boxes. And then the other side is just reality. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like you can be as prepared and overly prepared as possible, but you gotta have to go with the flow and be willing to ditch what you thought was like a foolproof plan. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Like in regards to like, do you have something like specific in mind? Or just in general, like yes, like the blended family experience, like the beauty and the hardships, like what do you mean by that?
So in terms of like, okay, so preparation, right? So I would say, going into marriage with someone who didn't have a kid. So my husband
Mm-hmm.
had any children before we got married. So me already being more experienced with parenting, just doing the best I can to prepare him for different scenarios that I think could either make or break our relationship or put some unnecessary strain on the relationship. So, having those hard conversations, like just a simple example. I remember before we got married, I would like drill him. I'm getting over a cold. I'm so sorry. But I would like drill him on certain topics. So I'd be like, Mac, one day he's gonna look at you and he gonna be like, you ain't my daddy. How you gonna feel? And he would look at me like, girl, what? I'm like, I need you to I need you to feel the emotions, let the emotions run through you. And he would look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, I'm telling you, I'm prepared.
Not so you hit him with a hypothetical. Is that what you're saying?
So many. That's until this day. I still do it. I know my family
Oh
thinks
my
it's
gosh.
crazy, but we live in hypotheticals here. What would you do in this situation? So, and I would just out of nowhere hit him. I'm like, you ain't my daddy. Like just to see. I was like, I need to reaction. I'm like, I need to see a reaction. I need you to feel the pain, feel the embarrassment, feel the shame. Like I need you to feel all the negative emotions so I can walk you through it because one day it's going to happen. Lo and behold, one day it did
Wow.
actually happen. And when he came, I was like, see, didn't I try to prepare you for this? And it was just so interesting how we worked through that. And, I'm always like a cheerleader on both sides, but
Yeah.
it's just, I'm always trying to think ahead, and it's for me, unfortunately, it's always like worst case scenario. So I'm always trying to like be hyper vigilant and prepare people for the worst is coming, like doomsday prepping. But those are just a very simple example of just of many ways I just went about trying to, really help his transition and just make it
Yeah.
as seamless as possible. But the other side of that is, you can't plan for everything.
Right.
So I think it's been more so in the past year with having a teenager that I realized I wasn't prepared at all. So, and neither was he. But
Okay, so we're going to go there. We're actually about to go there. So I'm actually loving that. First of all, I want to say kudos to you and round of applause because I heard so much wisdom in what you just said. I don't know that my mind. I don't know what I thought you were going to respond like when I asked you like how is a blended family? Like that's obviously a generalized question. Families are families. There are different families. That's just like you asking me like how was a non-blended family. Like, you know what I mean? There's experiences that are unique to every family. But the
yes.
fact that you said that you threw out the hypotheticals and preparation like really stood out to me because we talk a lot. We actually had a whole episode dedicated to how surprises happen and like not that necessarily the antidote to surprises, but the antidote to how when we respond in an unhealthy manner to surprises because
Mhm.
you can't how do you prepare for surprises? You do the internal work and you do as much preparation as you can, so that way you can be in control of how you respond in the moment when a surprise happens. Like, you know what I mean? So I just love that you kind of hit them like, this is how I'm foreseeing. Oh my goodness. We talked about that in that episode too. Like, pretty much preparation allows you to foresee how much how you'll respond. It's our best predictor of life. Like, you know what I mean? A lot of things don't have to necessarily be a surprise, but in a surprise, you know, we can dictate like to a degree how we'll respond. So you literally did that with him as your spouse, just like, and you say it's a small thing, but I really see it as a big thing, because it's those little everyday occurrences. First of all, we already know how couples, you be ready to call it quits, because it's the, sir, you chewed a little too loudly today.
Just a little bit.
I'm so it's like the everyday occurrences. So that friction, just due to proximity of your son and your spouse, and even if it's great every day, like there's going to be that day, because that's just normal. And you just preparing him being able to respond properly probably set a tone just for Charlie alone, just in how he sees him. So, oh my goodness. Anyway, so we're going to get into this because you were going exactly where I wanted to get.
Nice.
I wanted to start the meat of the topic in terms of, in this podcast, we often, like throughout every episode, there's one common theme, and that theme is experience, particularly bad ones. And that how, if they're seen from the right vantage point, they can strengthen us. Like, what can often be our greatest qualifier for influencing and impacting people, or our greatest teachers in life, are those bad situations if we handle them right. And so your story, I feel like, is a story that a lot of women and young girls can relate to. And I'd like you to share that in terms of, how did you find yourself, like pre-Mac, pre-Caramel Man? How did you find yourself pregnant and single?
So I found myself, throughout the time of my pregnancy, my ex and I, we were together. So we didn't call it quits until after I had, maybe a year into after I had my son. But I landed pregnant because I guess I was just out here just living carelessly. Well, so, you know, everything was fun until it wasn't, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So, you know, you find yourself pregnant. I think I was maybe like 19 or 20, somewhere in that range. And find myself pregnant. I had about maybe 3.5 college credits to my name. And I'm just like, wow, this is an interesting position to be in, you know, especially with my family, my upbringing. We just went completely as far left as I could go. I just kept going in that direction. But
you gotta test it. You gotta test it. But no, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
I did test the boundaries, maybe a little bit too much, but I believe the moment that I did officially find myself as a single mom was when I decided that, you know, it just wasn't what I wanted. You know, I think everything, I even when I talk to other people now, I'll tell them, you know, once you settle in with that person, you do find yourself going back to your roots. You go back to wanting what was comfortable for you growing up, what felt safe for you growing up. And for me, growing up, was what felt safe was, you know, having both of my parents in the home. You know, they were pretty much, for the most part, on the same page, you know, as far as religion, how they choose to raise us. There wasn't much friction with that. So when I found myself in a situation, I did test the boundaries. I did decide to live with my ex. I personally did not want to get married at that point, without just something internally told me you kind of need to kind of test this equation out a little bit to see if this is going to be what you want before you find yourself in something that's just super locked in. So once I settled into that relationship, I realized the family structure that I always wanted, I don't necessarily see the pieces here, you know.
Wow.
And I find myself yearning for that. You know, I've always wanted, of all my friends, they knew Hesdie always want to get married. That was all I wanted. I just want to get married, have some kids, and raise a family.
Aww.
That's all I wanted. Everything
you
else.
were that friend. Yes.
I was that.
I had one of those friends. It wasn't me.
Yeah.
That's not my
So
testimony.
that was me.
But that's where I ended up. Come on now.
Listen, ain't got good. But
that's
but like, even though you know, I got pregnant before I was married. I said, okay, you know, we can always fix it, you know, as long as, you know, two people, we want to work together, we want to build this family. But I didn't quite see the qualities that I needed,
Mhm.
that I knew would love me the way I wanted to be loved, that would raise this family along the same lines. So I did, make the executive decision. And of course, there were other things that happened in the relationship that kind of helped me make my decision even faster. But, I made the executive decision that I would rather be a single mom. And I did take into account everything that came with that. I knew I would get talked about. Like, I knew I would
Mhm.
be looked at a certain way. I knew that the family would be disapproving. All things considered, I think, you know what, I'll bet on myself
Oh
and
my goodness.
and we'll just take it from there.
Okay. All right. So, I said this last time I had a guest on here. You making me hit the Macaulay Culkin face with no, I'm serious because I'm like, all right, I just love who I chose for each topic. You I felt like you just answered all my questions, but we're going to delve in anyway in terms of
Let's
like
go.
just wow, 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 wow. You said so much stuff. So you said you wanted to go back to your roots and what felt safe. And I love that you said you decided because she's like, let's get this straight. Okay, it was an executive decision.
It
You
was.
decided that you would rather be a single mom than to have what wasn't for you. And the reason why I love that is because I was going to ask you, what did you find most shocking in that situation? And I'll tell you why, like when it ended, essentially. I'll tell you why I'm asking that question. What I love this topic because even though I don't share that same experience as like within my marriage, I share that experience in terms of my mother was a single mother. And there's a lot I think that comes with being a child of a single mom, like and if you hear or experience certain things and blah blah blah. But what I think that stood out to me is when it comes to my mom, for example, like it's the story that I grasped was that she took a chance. My mom is not necessarily one who's very open to, I want to be in this. She was never a huge relationship person. And my dad was her childhood sweetheart. And she had a complicated history herself when it came to step parents in terms of my grandmother, who I love, RIP, that was my best friend. My grandmother, her and my mother had opposite personalities in terms of my grandmother was like, listen, if it ain't working for me, thank you. Next. Like,
Period.
and so for my period, that's what it was. So for my mom's dad, they had a great relationship, but he passed. And so then she met my aunt's father and she was married to him, had a couple children, and he was not I gather he was not the best step parent because, and I think in all cultures, but in Haitian culture, you can have those certain men who, if you're not my child, then I'm going to treat you like you're not my child. And then that didn't work out. My grandma was like, okay, thank you. And then her last husband, she had her the youngest with my aunt, and then he passed as well too. So my mom, I think on account of that, she had determined in her mind that I'm only going to have children with one man. Unfortunately, I'll say it's not that it's wrong. It's not a wrong thought, but at what cost?
Yeah.
And unfortunately for her, I think that what became like a theme, and she talks very honestly with this, like with us as her daughters about this. What became a theme is that she's just like, I'm not going to mimic what I saw and what I experienced and what I didn't like. I'm not going to put my kids through that. But she just assumed that it would be the same scenario. And, even though as a kid, I'm not going to say that I necessarily, wanted a stepfather, but kids are selfish, you know what I mean? Like, and I didn't necessarily communicate that to her. But as she got older, I'm like, I wish you would have I just wish you didn't put all your eggs in one basket, because what I saw was that she felt like there was definitely this resentment in terms of, I felt like I made the quote unquote right decision of staying with the one person, right? And she was very married to that process of being with the one person, but the outcome wasn't what she wanted it to be, and it wasn't what she envisioned. And so you can think you're doing the right thing, quote unquote, a right thing, and then in the end, what did it cost you? And so I think that's just so powerful that you're like, no, I already saw that you loving yourself that much and understanding that about yourself, having that awareness to be like, no, I rather be a single mother and everything that comes with that. So what came with that? And I know we can all speculate, but what are some things that came with that?
A lot.
Yeah.
I think for some time I carried a big chip on my shoulder, because I think often I was able to carry this, persona of being super strong. I had a lot of moments where I fell apart a lot, alone. But I think the hardest thing that it took me quite some time to get over was I never quite understood what the big deal was.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, I got pregnant, my reproductive parts work, praise God. Like,
I
you know,
love you. I
like
love you.
I get it. Like they work. And I had a
Yes.
healthy pregnancy, I had a healthy child, I gotta figure it out financially a little bit, but I always knew I would be a really good mom. Like I've always had a lot of love to give, and I was more than happy to pass that over to a kid. But the hardest part was the way people treated me. Like what changed about me? My personality is still the same. I'm still
Yeah.
happy-go-lucky Hesdie. I'm still a good friend. I'm still a good daughter. I'm still a good sister. I'm still a good person. Like I could never quite understand because I mean I've grown. I've gotten wiser. I've
Mhm.
done a lot, but I'm still in essence the same Hesdie. So
Yeah.
why was that such a reason to be treated that differently? I can't
Yeah.
honestly say I've gotten to the bottom of it. I think I've made peace with it, but that was the part that hit me the hardest. That why was I treated so differently because of this?
Wow. I want to dissect so much that you said up till now. Including that part. So that feels like that was obviously pretty shocking. Like, you know what I mean? In terms of like, whoa, like just I'm the same person, but yet everybody is now all of a sudden there's this label,
Mhm.
there's this mask. And we talk a lot about that too on this podcast as to like we get labeled and placed in this box, but just because something is fact about us, like, yeah, I got pregnant. Yes, like you say, my reproductive parts work. Yeah, we figured that out maybe not in the timeline that was ideal or for you or for me or whatever, but what that's not what's truth about me, and that's not what's truth about my entire life. So
Mhm.
I want to you honed in a little bit in terms of um just I want to go back a little bit to that executive decision when you realized that the relationship was over. What changed? Like, how did you know that this was it? Like, was there an action change on his part, or was there more like an attitude change within yourself? And I asked this because we've been recently talking about attitudes as well, and
Mhm.
how our belief systems play into our attitudes and what we think about ourselves and what we think about just that foundational part. And so your attitude is your way of thinking that ends up being expressed in your behaviors.
Mhm.
So what happened what was your sign to make you know that this is over between me and him, and this is where we need to take two different routes?
For me, it was the way you treat me when you're upset with me.
Mm-hmm.
And that for me was, along with, there was infidelity issues, you know, which I think because that was, the person I had a child with, maybe that version of Hesdy probably could have tried to work through that. But
Mm.
it's just the way you talk to me. And I mean, when you're so upset and you feel that you have all the liberties to just say anything, and you do. And then I noticed the version of Hezi that was you know being encouraged by that environment. There's multiple versions of Hezi. Whichever one you want is available. Right?
Yes.
Whichever one you want, I could make it happen for you. But
Yes.
I didn't feel my best self. Like I
Mm.
didn't feel that you were bringing out the best of me. So I remember the day I did absolutely decide to leave. I was washing dishes, and I remember that day vividly. And I was crying. And I said to myself, I said, one day someone is going to love me the way I know I need to be loved. And
Woo-wee.
in that moment, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I was washing dishes, the water was warm, and the tears were warm running down my face. And I just kept saying it to myself, just having a quiet conversation with myself. And in that moment, I knew I was going to pack up my son, and I was going to make that executive decision that I will make myself a single mother and figure it out from there.
Oh my gosh. See, Hezzy, you're talking very heavy, miss. You are. Because people almost like use the single mom title as a threat, right? Like almost the opposite way around. So for you to take that and be like, no, I'm good. I'm really good. And this is a choice. Okay. There's no threat here. I'm threatening you with the fact that this is what I'm going to do. Me and mine. I love that. But also you said two important things. You weren't bringing the best of me out. You weren't bringing the best out of me. And you had a combo with yourself. I can't even speak to how important it is for us to literally speak to ourselves, because this podcast is about self-leadership. So we have to lead ourselves. Like I can imagine that you're probably thinking like, how can I speak to my son if I can't speak to myself? Like depending on what he'll see in a situation, like how can I speak to others if I can't speak to myself? And so you had a combo with yourself that this person is not bringing the best out of you. And I really love that, because I often talk about this book that I've read, and it was really just game changing for me. And it's called Relational Intelligence. It's by Dr. Dharius Daniels. And he says that our biggest gifts walk into our lives on two legs, because he's talking about the fact that it's at the end of the day, it's not what we have, it's who we have in our lives. But for that reason, I think that we have to be careful, like especially as human beings with hearts and feelings, to not romanticize people, because at the same time, our biggest hurts often come from people too. And people are they're like, I talked about how in one episode, how like my daughter, for example, was a mirror for me to reflect and see, okay, I don't like what I'm saying because maybe she's taking it some way, so I'm going to change. And so we have to pay attention to how people help shape us. Like just like our environment, people shape us. And like you're saying, I got a version. There's a version of me that can come out. And this person is you're kind of, that's the version you're constantly tugging on. And that's not who I'm trying to evolve into. That's not who I want to be, the primary Hesdie. That's not who I want at the forefront. And I just think that that's like, girl. So like, kudos. I don't know if you have anything else to say to that part, but that's just so powerful. Like you speaking to yourself and him and realizing that he wasn't bringing the best out of you.
And that point is really, I think now that we're talking about, I'm saying it out loud, because most of these conversations, I talk to myself in my head all day. But like, I think this is the first time I've like had this conversation out loud. And now that I think about this, that's really how I carry myself, like in my marriage, how I raised my kids. Like with Charlie, it was always, I want you to be proud of who I am as a person.
Yes.
So everything I do, I have to look at it. And one day when he tells my story, this is the content I'm giving you. This is what I'm giving you to pick from. So I have to be mindful that I'm giving him options that reflect, someone he can be proud of. Yeah, my mom was with my dad, things didn't work out, but her life didn't end because she had me. She went on to do this, she lived life, she had a healthy relationship. So it's like giving him all these, examples of, wow, I admire her, with my husband. I want to be a wife that he's proud of, and not just a showpiece, not, she looks good, she puts it on. But like, how do I make you feel about yourself as a person? Like, do you feel free in this space? Do you feel valued in this space? Would you have chosen another option if you could, all things considered and everything that we're dealing with? Like, how do I make you feel as a person? And
so
that
wise.
All of my relationships, my friendships, at work, it is. But when it comes to my personal relationships, is I need to know, how do I make you feel as a person? Even my kids, they're kids and they're under my rule, but how do I make you feel as a person? And that's just my guiding practice. And so far, I think it's working out pretty well.
Yes, girl, that's so wise. That's so wise, because that is the ultimate goal. Like that, when you shape yourself, you're able to just like, without trying, be an example for others, namely like those who are looking to you, like your child. Like that's so. You said so much. So I wanted to know, what was your goal then at that point? Because I like I said, this episode is about love, parenting, and marriage. You were in love. You had this relationship. You guys you decided to have this child. And now after the child, we realize this is not working. We're pivoting. And regardless of what the, whatever people's viewpoints or their opinions are, internally, you have a vision of what you want your life to look like. And so I have to make hard decisions right now in order to get the life that I want later. So what was your goal at that point when that relationship ended, and now it's you and your child and it's single parenting, and you just deciding like I'm going to move out with my child? What was your goal? Was it to find love? Was it to just work on you? Was it to, I don't know, like some people like revenge, get better? Like, what was your goal? What do you think your mind was at that time?
So my first goal was, again, I never wanted my son to be able to look at my life and say he was the reason why I never ...
Mm-hmm.
So I never wanted him to have the opportunity to blame himself for, me not meeting my potential or anything like that. So my first goal, I needed to establish myself financially.
Mm-hmm.
So my first goal was to make sure, I already had a bachelor's, but I ended up, decided to go into nursing because I wanted to be able to provide for my son without having to rely on family. An example was that he went on vacation with my sister, and it was so nice. My older sister, she brought him along, her and her husband and their kids, they paid for everything. And I was very grateful that they always brought him along. But it kind of stirred something in me that I never wanted my son to be someone's charity case. And I know my family would never.
Come on now.
That, but I knew that if he ever did go on vacation again with anyone, whatever amount that they needed for him, oh, he's coming with it. That I didn't necessarily need anyone to pay his way. So that was the most important thing, to put myself in position that I could do more than just a little bit for myself and my son.
I love that.
After that, then I started working on myself. Like I kind of suppressed, any negative emotions. It was tunnel vision. I need to get licensed. So once I got closer to the end of that, I started lightly touching into some inner work. Not going too deep because some feelings I just wasn't quite ready to address. It wasn't really until I got married and my husband made it a really super safe space. And the reason for that is when you're with someone who's emotionally and psychologically stable, so you don't have to fix this person, right?
Yeah.
You ain't got nothing but time to look at yourself. Ain't got like, don't come over here. I don't have no issues for you. Like, so it got to that point where I'm like, okay, well, I don't have issues. I mean, everyone has their flaws, but it's just like standard. And I really have, I'm forced to I look at myself, your thought processes, how you react to things. Like, why are you triggered so much by certain things? Like, that's when the work really got deep. And I think now we're like year 7 in, I finally reached a point. I'm like, oh, I can breathe a little bit better, but it's been rough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh goodness. So I love that. That was so honest, because I love that you said that you needed to work on, you decided to work on your finances first. What I heard in that was, we often talk about like exposure, right? In terms of, so when you're exposed to something, you can't be unexposed. And that often ignites like passion and desire to get something that you like, what you see. Like, if that's possible for you, like, they say, if you did it for someone, do it for me, Lord. So I hear what I hear is like one-on-one, and Charlie got an opportunity to get exposed to things that at that moment, if you couldn't do it for him, you had a support system that was able to expose him to things. So I love that. But you seeing that, even though that you were grateful for that, exposed and ignited you to be like, like, I need to be able to do this for my child as well. I want him to be exposed to it here, like as many good things as I can personally, and to expose him to, I would love to do. And so you just saying like, you worked on the finances first and then I worked on me. I love that, because it's honest in terms of, sometimes like we're going to hit seasons, like sometimes you only got energy for one area. Yeah. And sometimes you have to focus on surviving in order to thrive later. And so had to, like, I hear that was survival mode. Like, we got to get these finances together, and that might last for a while. It's not sustainable because you're going to get hit by those moments of, all right, girl, your mood and your emotions and the stuff you got to work out in therapy is showing through.
Yes.
Maybe,
Volatile.
yeah, volatile, yes, a lot of labile moods, okay. But then eventually we're going to focus on these moods so that way we can thrive. And I love that. So what did you do? I think you started to maybe hint on this a little bit. What did you do to become a better parent and woman?
So it's, from what I'm noticing, it's been happening in like every new stage requires an improved or revised version of myself. And I think I was so accustomed to being in fight or flight that even in my marriage, I brought that with me. Hyper independence, I'm hyper vigilant. It's just hyper because I'm so accustomed to being at such a heightened state. I'm always, preparing to be attacked, not physically, but it's always like, mentally. I'm just always on guard. Bringing my guard down, and it took some coaching. I always felt safe with my husband being around Charlie. That was never a question. But then it came the safety with, you have to relinquish some of this parenting power and allow this person to also make decisions, to also have input. And what I'm thankful for is, of all people, because I've known my husband ever since I was very young, of all the people, like, I've known him since I was like 12 or 13, he was always the person I could always be most honest with. Even
I
before,
forgot that you guys knew each other before.
long time.
Wow.
So, even before we got, super married and engaged, like, if I was like dating other people, I'd call him like, you won't believe this man just broke up with me. He'd be like, you ain't deserved that. I'm like, I know I didn't.
So wait, do you think, was he always, I'm sure y'all talked about this, was he feeling you at that time? The people want to know.
When we were young, we had this little puppy love thing going on. It was always back and forth. I'd go down to Jersey just because I would see him and my cousins knew. And it was always like, but he was always like such a stable person. And, my little teenage self was just bopping around everywhere. But he, more than anything, he's always been a really, really, really good friend. Really good friend. So, and I'm happy we were able to bring that into the marriage, so that if anyone, I could have just straight up tell him like where my mind is and why I'm reacting a certain way. If I overreacted about something, I could easily say, like, deep down, I'm afraid that, he's not going to feel fully accepted in this family. I'm afraid that because we create a new family, you might create resentment. I could go there with him and let him know that you see anger, you see, anxiety, you see these things over here, but this is what's triggering it. I'm having some insecurities, like, so that really helped a lot with kind of bringing the guard down, knowing that in my home, I felt the safest. So, and I know there's situations where people don't feel as comfortable to be completely free and open with their spouses. That one, if don't nobody else know my business, Mac do. He does. He knows.
Like, sir, this is what's going on. This is what had transpired on yesterday.
Yeah. So so that was the first step, was really bringing my guard down. And then I had to ditch certain aspects of my personality that just no longer served me. I didn't need to be that Hesdie anymore. Like, I didn't need to fight in this aspect anymore. I had to be okay with welcoming new versions of myself, or finally giving versions of myself that I had to lay dormant room to grow. So, I remember once saying to my husband, because, I think he's a beautiful person. I'm like, you're a really beautiful person. Like, why are you so nice? Why are you so kind? And I had this quiet thought to myself. I said, you know what? God loves him too. And God knows how he created him, that he's a nice and kind person. I don't think God would ever allow him to align himself with someone who isn't also nice and kind. Bingo. And so it was in that moment I realized, like, I too am a nice and kind person, but I've had to tuck that version of myself deep, 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 deep far away, because I had to fight so many different battles back to back that I became a fighter, but that's not my nature. I'm
Yeah.
a nice and kind person, and that's why he and I get along so well, because we're kindred spirits. But it took a moment for me to kind of accept that, yeah, you can let that go. You can be who God created you to be, and it's not that version that you've been forced to operate as just because of your circumstances.
There are people, you said something big. You said he's kind, he's healthy, he's a good person. You don't think God would align him with somebody who is not that as well. And I think that is so powerful, because truth of the matter is there are people who are unhealthy for someone, right? And they can see that this person is really everything good and kind. They're good for me, but am I good for them? Right. And often we have this conversation the other way around. Sometimes it comes down to people might be genuinely bad people, but in their circumstances, it's not necessarily always a good or bad thing, like good or bad person. Sometimes somebody's just not good for you.
Yes.
And we like to automatically feel like it needs to be like a villain, right? In every story. But sometimes they're just not your cup of tea, literally. And
Yep.
yes. And sometimes I think we often have this conversation where it's like, I need to pay attention to if this person is good for me, like, because I'm good for them, because we always see ourselves in a good light.
Yeah.
But you, on the flip side, said he deserves good, like he deserves healthy. Am I that for him? And even though I love that that was your place of like being kind to yourself, to say God wouldn't give him that, just the fact that God didn't give him that, like, and I think just the fact that you did the work and you asked those questions, and you wanted to be that person for him, that's big, Hesdie. Because believe it or not, which I know you believe it, there are some women or some partners that would have been like, I'm toxic. And guess what? He's good for me though. I'm okay. I'm a taker. And what I hear in that is that you're like, no, this is not going to just be me taking. It needs to be give and take, reciprocation. And that's amazing.
No, it's important. Our going into married life story there was a lot. There was a lot to it. And I think more than anything, I've always wanted someone to just, it goes back to that, just choose me for me.
Yeah.
And I think with everything that I've gone through, and Mac always had inside knowledge of everything, he never made me feel any kind of way about anything. He was always that place where I could just be Hesdie. And, he never bought into if I was all super dressed up. He was like, okay, girl, like, I know what you look like without your wig on. Like, relax.
Don't act like y'all don't know what's under this perique, okay?
He never.
We teach about one Creole word per show. Okay, so perique is the word for today. Just in case the listeners need to know, tell the people. Tell them again, Hesdie.
It's a wig.
It's a wig. Okay. Don't assume we always got one on now. Okay. Don't make that mistake.
He never did. Didn't matter, how crazy my life looked or whatever, what other people had to say. He just saw me. He saw my core. So,
all right. So I got questions. The people got questions and I got questions too. Okay. So I want to ask two things. I feel like I enjoy when you talk about your caramel man. I can imagine there are people that might say, she's always trying to act like, and it's not always malicious. People might wonder, oh, is he so perfect? Is he so perfect? Is he so perfect? Do you ever get feedback on people getting tired of you talking about how good your man is? Because Shantae's got a man at home.
I mean, no.
Good.
Because, like, me and him, I think the issue is that I'm not one to publicize anything negative in my relationship. His flaws are for me to know, and maybe y'all will find out. That ain't got nothing to do with y'all. If you know my personality,
there you go.
You can already guess that I'm sure they argue. I have a very fiery personality. You're going to know what I'm thinking, when I'm thinking it, if I'm thinking it. It's just, God just decided to cut me a major break and say, you know what, girl, I think you've been through enough. I'm going to give you this one.
I love it. Because
that's
people
how I
can, they
see
can
it.
look at you like, sometimes we can see, and again, not malicious thing, but sometimes people we can, and sometimes I think people they're afraid. Like sometimes we can be, I'll say not just people, we could be afraid to say, this is what's going well in my life. We're afraid to shout it from the rooftops because what do we say? If I say it, something's going to go wrong. If I say it, then if I get embarrassed and sometimes it's not a matter of embarrassed. It just might be regular couple everyday life stuff. So now I can't, celebrate something just on an account that we argue tomorrow. So I love that your response was, it's not that he's perfect. It's not that he's still human, but you're saying, but that's none ya. That's none ya. And if I want to,
if it makes anybody feel better, we argued today for at least a good 30 minutes while I was sitting in the parking lot at Starbucks.
No, it don't make us feel better because we only that don't matter. Okay. And I just argued with I just argued with Maurice when I came in because
before I got my matcha latte, my venti matcha latte, I sat in that car and I went hoarse and I walked into Starbucks. I said, hi, please have a venti matcha latte. And I smiled all the way back to the car, turned the phone back on this end, and I was saying, so listen, it happened.
Yes. And we're not talking about unhealthy banter or unhealthy. The point is, if this is the person, this is why marriage, they say, and it's true, builds sanctification in terms of it, and to take not to even take a biblical word, like make it apply to everybody. Marriage builds character, is what I want to say, because naturally you're not going to be your best self all the time. Nope. And you have to choose somebody that when you're not your best self, like one thing I give, and I'm gonna come back to this because I want to ask you this question too. I give Maurice credit though, because one thing that I do love, even though he's my headache, I call him crazy old Maurice. And I say that for a reason. Like I said, I'm gonna come back to it, is because I can be I get hangry. I love to laugh. I love to laugh. Everybody knows that. But the other side of Kimbo is
not Kimbo.
Like it is that's Jazzy. Kimbo Slice. Kimbo Slice came after I was called Kimbo since a kid. Okay. Listen, people know that was a nickname that I got from one of my neighbors and it just stuck. Okay. But the other side of Kimbo is I might get a little isolated and I get a little hangry. And what I like is that sometimes when I'm in that mood, I don't even realize it. And Maurice just like, you just hungry. And I'm like, excuse me? No, don't be, don't diminish my, don't invalidate my feelings to hanger. And then he just passes me a piece of food and I eat it. I'm like, thanks, babe. Because I really was hungry. And even though you did just get on my nerves, I was hungry. So this is what I wanted to ask you, like, and just going along with this, like, not that the focus is, to harping on Mac, but I just think these are just such great topics and it'll help a lot of people. I can relate to being that person, like what you're saying. Between the two of us, me and Maurice, I would say that who was more visibly problematic. And again, for people that's fine if they don't know, problematic at home was me due to my issues. And maybe again, we talked a little bit about my issues. So I started to notice, I really need to work on this. And but I noticed that as I worked on things, then I think sometimes as a couple, we can know like, all right, we need to work on this with this one person. That sometimes the other person, not that they can stagnate, but you might diminish what your issues are, or maybe they just weren't the priority at the time naturally because mine were just so heightened and we really needed to deal with whatever was going on emotionally. So eventually I felt like I got to a place where I could say, hey, babe, actually, you need to work on this a little bit. And so did you feel like with you, like, because I love like that you're able to say this doesn't take away anything from him. I love how you're able to say he's a win, he's a hack. Come on now. I talked about that in my last one of the attitude episodes. He's a hack for you. He was a solution for you. This is a blessing for you. Did you, in your work of yourself, and naturally we grow as people, did you get to moments where you were like, you know what, Mackie Mac? You know what, Caramel Man? As I'm growing in this area, I might need you to work on or sharpen this area right here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm a teacher by nature. If I'm learning something and I'm getting excited about it, naturally, I'm going to pass it over. So And even at the start of our relationship, to prepare, it was like, we're going to study our way into how to get married. And we're going to ask each other 1,000 questions. So as I grew and I, evolved into different versions of myself, one thing I always tell him is, I'm not going to be the same Hezzie that you married. So as I grow, I want us to grow together because I never want us to grow apart. So as I matured more as a wife, and I started noticing certain things, I would say, babe, you know what? This version you was really good when we first started, but what do you think about maturing in this aspect? And then I give suggestions. See, I'm not that kind of person. I'm just going to try to tear you down and not gently guide you into this. Number one, this is my husband. This is my friend. This is my safe space. Anything I say to you is going to be lovingly. If the world can try to tear you down, I'm not going to be the one to do it. So I say, hey, won't you try listening to this person on YouTube? Won't you try Googling this? Because he is so constant and so stable. He was just happy to be content and he just gonna just chill right here. But I'm always like, hey, we can get better, we can grow, we can evolve. And I always send suggestions. Our text message is like riddled with a bunch of YouTube suggestions. I'm screenshotting, I'm sitting there like, go for it. And thank God I'm married to someone who doesn't feel like his masculinity is being threatened because I make suggestions or I make observations and I comment on those. He'll just be like, okay, if he agrees with something, he'll say, all right, I'll look into it. Don't nobody fact check me better than Mac. He'll be like, nope, not doing it. Yep. And even like when we have disagreements, I'm like losing my voice. He won't say anything back. He's always very quiet. And I'm the only one talking. And one day I said to him, I said, well, how come when we argue, you don't say nothing? You're just quiet. He's like, well, I'm fact checking you in my head. I'm like, who does that? He's like, well, the points I agree with, I moved them to this side. And the points I completely disagree with. I'm like, so while I'm arguing with you, you're debriefing with yourself? Like, okay, sir. Anyway.
Right.
So, that's just our relationship. So to kind of circle back, as I'm growing and I'm evolving, I encourage him to do the same. And the conversation is always, listen, I want this marriage experience to be the best ride we've ever been on. Mm-hmm. And I'm willing to do anything to make sure that as much, as you're a blessing to me, I'm a blessing to you, and we're a blessing to these kids. And that's everything ties back into that. So if we got to keep auditing ourselves and, make necessary improvements and adjustments, then we're just going to do that. But it has to be lovingly, just because I know one day we're going to have to go our separate ways, like we're not going to do we're not going to be around forever. And if he has to sit back and think about me, if I go first, I really want him to look back and be like, man, like those were the best whatever years of my life. Like, I love being married to her. She was so good to me. Like I always think about, it's always doom and gloom, but that's just, so yeah, I do point out his little flaws and, encourage him to go ahead and touch on that.
It's crazy because my pastor said something that I stole for my life. And he says, I want the people who know me the most who know me the best to respect me the most, something along those lines. I have it written down, but I've adopted that as one of my life goals because we hear so much of it being the opposite, right? Like how many times people grow up in a house and they're like, I want to be nothing like my dad. I want to be like my mom. Just spouses as well too, of just feeling like who you are at home is not who the world gets. And it's a lot of times I get on one side that it's because we go out into the world can quite physically beat up on us, right? It could be a tough place. And so you get back home and home is a safe place, but for some of us, we take that to mean it's almost like transparent in a worse way, where now this is where we lash out. This is where we just, instead of using it to release in order to like now take in and receive love and improve and get strength to go out and deal with the world again. Instead, we come out and we like release all of our anger and all of our insecurities and all of our pride on the people who are home because we feel entitled. Like You have to deal with this. Like, you have to, like, and they really don't. Like, you know what I mean? They really don't. There's choices, and I hear you saying chose and decided, and I want him to look back and know. And I just hear so much of those words, accountable words. And so this is going to kind of segue us into the a couple questions. How did you? So I kind of want to ask. Maybe I could ask these two together, but I want to know how Charlie responded to you guys, your relationship. But also I want to know, how did you start to trust Mac with what I call your two hearts, which is your actual heart, which clearly was vulnerable and clearly had a lot of things to work through, but also Charlie, who was your heart outside of your body, like your heart on two legs. That feels like double the vulnerability. Could you speak to that?
So, one thing I said to Mac was, I never want my son to feel that he doesn't belong. And I could never be with someone who would cause my son mental or physical harm. So I was always very straight up about that. And that he needed to be sensitive to, our situation, kind of like the transition. So I've always been very transparent about, my biggest fear is that someone would hurt my son. Do not hurt my son. So once we had that conversation and I felt comfortable with Meg, and of course, on knowing his upbringing, his core values, just who he's always shown himself to be for well over 10, 15 years, I felt that I had a pretty strong grasp on the person I was introducing my son to. So I felt safe with that aspect. As far as Charlie's concerned, again, I'm a prepper. So we had our little prep sessions as well. One of the conversations I had with him, I've been prepping. I prepped on the idiot. One thing we gonna do is prep. So
questions.
First thing I said to him was, I said, mommy and Mac are getting married. And that conversation was, I distinctively told him that he does not have to feel that he has to pick Mac over his dad. Using a couple of little medical help, I said, your heart is a big chamber and there's 4 little spaces in it. That means you could put mommy in one, you could put your daddy in one, and that means there's 2 more spaces. You can leave room for Mac, right? So there's room. You can love a lot of people in that heart of yours. And you don't have to call him dad. You can call him Mac if that makes you feel more comfortable, but just know you don't have to feel guilty if you start realizing you kind of like him too. So I know having that conversation with him kind of like freed him from the responsibility of feeling like pick one or the other, that he can go at his own pace. And there was no requirement for him to call Mac dad because and I said to Charlie, I said, we know who your daddy is and you look just like him. So, nobody's coming to take that spot. So, but I think it would be great if you have, the more people to love you, the better. Like, what do you think about that? So kind of laid the groundwork for that. Over time, my conversations with Charlie has, evolved. He does know that, there will be no disrespecting of either parent. So he knows, if you see him, you see me. So I say that so much.
Yes.
The other day, he DoorDashed himself some Popeyes. So the Popeyes came and he ate what he wanted and he gave me the cold fries. So I said, well, why would you come and offer me some cold fries and you didn't even offer Mac anything? He was like, well, when I see you, I see him, right? So y'all go ahead. Y'all go ahead and y'all
hit you back with it.
Right. Y'all go ahead and y'all share those cold fries. I said, touche, no problem.
Right.
He gets it.
I love it.
We talk about what else? Occasionally in the beginning, I did it more often than I do now. I would check in with him. So, we would go out, or if it's just the 2 of us that's home, I'd kind of have, like state of the union. Like, how's it going for you? Like, how do you feel about this situation? If anybody make you feel like you don't belong, is there anything that we're doing right? Is there anything that we're doing wrong? What do you think we could do to improve? And I would ask for his input. Is anything, do you feel comfortable with the way Matt talks to you? When Eli came along, do you feel like he treats Eli better than you? Do you feel I need to know these? I would ask these things straight up. Let me know. Let me have it. And he gives straight up feedback. And so far, by the grace of God, it's been good feedback. Sometimes he'll get really mad and he'll be like, I like it when Mac is home. Because when he's home, it ain't all this talking. When you're home, all you do is yell and you're nagging. Mac is so chill. I'm like, I'm glad you prefer him over me. Good for you. Okay. But I think having, giving that room for him to speak freely, let him know that
Yeah.
if there's a problem, you can come to me. Now, granted, when he's wrong, Charlie, no, if you're wrong, you did wrong, and I'm gonna check you. But when
Right.
you're right, I will back you up. And that goes even, with parenting. If my husband makes a decision that, I don't necessarily agree with when it comes to the kids, never in front of them, because I'd be a fool if I let these kids think they can divide and conquer. But in private, it's like, babe, I don't think you should set
Yeah.
up that because of da da da.
Girl, you're teaching a class right now. You are. I didn't get to ask. Is there a co-parenting aspect? And has that helped with the success of how, just you guys parenting Charlie as a blended family?
That's yes and no. So,
Okay.
and I think that's the other side of the coin that I talked about, where you gotta, ditch that perfect plan that you had. Initially, I've always had this big idea that, okay, this plan didn't work, but we can create a new plan and we're gonna have a perfect co-parenting relationship. Unfortunately, that did not happen.
Okay.
So I think primarily it's because I've always tried to overcompensate, and that's another conversation where I would overcompensate for all sides. And in growing and, kind of healing in many aspects, I decided I don't want to do that anymore. I no longer choose to overcompensate. Another aspect is,
This is me giving you a round of applause. Continue.
oh, my husband is the standard for how people speak to me.
Mm.
And I've gotten so accustomed to being
Standing on business. Okay, come
dealt with, he dealt with in such a gentle and kind manner that
Yeah.
I immediately reject and repel anything that doesn't resemble or feel like that. So all those things, brought together, it's like at this point, it is what it is. I'm just so happy that, my child is at the age where he can come to certain conclusions on his own. So I have no need to overcompensate. I have nothing else to prove. You can call me anything but a bad mom.
My goodness. My goodness. Did y'all hear? Okay. So we're gonna recap this for people who let's say you have a wonderful child and you are in a relationship and thinking about blending this family. Well, Sister Hesdie is out here giving us gems. Okay. And she said, first of all, in the co-parenting relationship, she got her somebody who done taught her how to love, like Music Soul Child said. Teach me how to love.
Yes.
Yes. And because of that, you have a standard. Well, you already had the standard, but it was matched in your husband. And as a result, that just kind of made it concrete for you what is tolerable and what is no longer okay and acceptable in your life. And even though you guys share a child, you have come to an amicable way to parent, and that does not involve. It does not have to involve him having access to you in a way that's detrimental to you and
Absolutely.
your mind. I love that. A few other things I heard. You aligned yourself with someone. If you are going to align yourself, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. So for the listeners, if you are going to align yourself with somebody and trust them with a child that you have already, you found someone that shared your core values, which I think is so important, because I always say that our values are the floor. We like sometimes people look at it as the standard, like the ceiling. I should say, but it's not. Your values are the floor, because they dictate where you start from, and you're not going beneath that. Like, this is where I start, this is where I begin. Because if it was the ceiling, that means you might tolerate or do things that are under that, if that makes sense. So you found somebody with your core values. You prepped Charlie just like you prepped your spouse. And what I really heard is that you didn't treat Charlie in a very fragile manner. I want to talk about that because you were very honest. Like, just, I think sometimes, I don't know, like sometimes from the outside looking in, I'm a very honest person too, but sometimes I try to think about different scenarios. What I have. And I love that we can think that kids can't handle things that they can handle. And the fact that you didn't treat them too fragile and say, listen, is he talking to you? Well, do you feel accepted? Do you feel like you're overlooked? Those are some hardcore questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you have to do it. I think it's sometimes as single mothers, we've been conditioned to believe that we are less deserving.
Mm.
You like, oh, don't you? No man who doesn't have kids already is gonna want you. No stand-up guy is gonna want you. Nobody's gonna want to marry you. So with being conditioned to think that way, we want, if we do find a slice of love, we want to hold on to it and protect it so bad because who's gonna love me again? This is my last shot,
Mhm.
So we shy away from doing the work that's needed to make sure that, even if I came with a kid and he didn't, I'm still a good woman. I'm just a good woman with a kid. So
Yeah.
as much as this relationship is beneficial to me, it's also beneficial to you as well. So it has to be mutually beneficial. And I think we never look at ourselves as if we're also a prize. We become the one that's just begging to be chosen and
Mm.
we act accordingly. And for me, I never looked at myself that way because I did the work that I needed to do to make myself feel more confident with myself. I took excellent care of myself physically. I took care of my mind. I got my money right. So at the end of the day, okay, yeah, the only advantage would be you get with someone who doesn't have a kid. So you wouldn't have to deal with that additional. And even with that additional, I also made sure I cleaned up house in that area. I set up some very strong boundaries. So if you did want to test them, you would be thinking a couple times before you do that.
Mhm.
So I did what I needed to do, that even if someone tried to make a remark, oh, you about to go play stepdaddy, it's like, oh, well, one day you're going to wish you were the one playing stepdaddy because trust me, he's in a good spot. Okay.
Come on, ma'am. Come on.
I'm just saying, he's doing all right to me. But
Yes, he did.
we're not conditioned to look ourselves like that. Once you become a single mom, all of a sudden you're used up. You're second best. You should be the
Yeah.
last or the least considered. And it's like, for what?
For what? I love that you said that because I literally have that written down. And I just knew it would organically come up. The reason why I love this is because this whole podcast and really in life, like this is why this topic is general, but it goes specific in so many areas. Like redemption is a thing. Like, and that first of all, it doesn't mean like there's not these, a lot of times what we like to just label people as, like you said, they're tossed away or no longer good.
Mm-hmm.
In general, when it comes to life, in general, when it comes to experiences and bad experiences, as we talked about, you will get set back in life. But a big part of that self leadership is redemption. It's like, yeah, I didn't label myself. I didn't necessarily demonstrate the best version of myself then, but this is who I am. And this is who I am now on account of me taking that and building a better, more evolved, more wiser person. And yeah, I didn't always shine the brightest light or I didn't use my highest logic, but on account of that failure, like this is where I am now, and I'll never do that again because I learned my lesson, or it made me understand boundaries. It made me understand relationships. It made me understand injury. It made me understand doing the hard work. It made me understand so much about life, and that's redemption. And so it's so interesting. I love that you said that. I just felt like, yeah, that a lot of times there's this sentiment where people say to people in general, but I don't know if you feel like they say more so to men that they should not marry people with children, i.e. women with children, because there's this assumption, right? And is this a pattern or is this a one-off? And I wanted to ask you, like, and I get that because when we're marrying someone, and it goes back to the conversation of you and Mac, and you seeing Mac as this, healed, whole person. And if you're seeing him as that person, this kind person, what are other people thinking, right? And so I think that on one end, it makes a lot of sense that if we're getting married, if we're getting in a relationship, we have to understand there's a mesh of lives, right? And sometimes that mesh includes just complicated and simple, or good and bad, but we have to, of course, balance out how much complicated am I going to take on. And when it comes to women, I'll just speak people with children, but in your circumstance, women with children from a previous relationship, do you feel like the assumption is often that this is just a pattern, this is how they are, even if you only had one child? Or do you feel like that people Like, do you feel like this was just like they saw it as, well, that could just be a one and done, or do you think they just labeled you as, this is a pattern, don't marry women with children?
think that I think the assumption is that because, you decide to have a kid without, being married, that means you just have no morals. That you have there's no good anywhere else, And I've thought about this so often. Like, why do women keep having these kids out of wedlock? Like, why do they keep putting themselves back into the same situation? And I think if someone can get into your head enough to make you believe that this is truly the best you can do, then you will prove them right as many times as you can. And if you get women to believe that, this is the best they can do, the best state they'll ever be is, a baby mama, or just keep having multiple children, then what more do they have to aspire to? Now, granted, I think there are people who try to make me believe that about myself, that, once this happened, this was just a catalyst and there would be absolutely no coming back from that. But I really do thank God that he did put something inside of me that's almost arrogant, that I was like, oh, let me prove you wrong. And or any guy that thought that, he had a one up on me because, and again, I dated for a little bit and I did have experiences where, you had men who initially may have been interested, but once they find out that, you know, I have a child, I get treated totally differently. And, the very petty side of me, and I know, God is still working on certain parts of certain people.
It's all right.
So the very petty side of me, I have audited, certain areas of my past. And I'm like, you know what? It didn't quite work out that well for you, did you? Because I'm very observant. I know how people look at my husband. I know people look at him like, wow, she serves her husband. When they're out in public, the chemistry is undeniable. She really loves this man. Like, he treats her well. And I'm like, yeah. And I can honestly say, I know there's plenty of people who would love to know what it feels like to be in what we have. And because I know what it feels like to not be in what I have, and I know what it felt like in a season where I was really praying for what I have, I'm motivated to make it even better.
Yeah.
So if you are a single mom, and you find yourself in this position, just know you are worthy of whatever you think you deserve. And so if it's love, if it's respect, if it's whatever you think you're worthy of, that's what you will go after. But it's not going to come easy, because now you're fighting an uphill battle where the system is essentially set up to constantly validate that you mean nothing. And you have to be the one to say, I don't think so. I don't care what you say. I'm going to shoot as far. I mean, my life is what I've always wanted, and it didn't come easy. And it's because I knew I was either going to have it or I was going to die trying.
Yeah.
And that was it, from the house I'm raising my kids in, to the neighborhood, to even the culture of our family, the atmosphere in our home. This is what I feel that I deserve. And I don't care what my circumstance look like. I don't care, what the statistics may have predicted or the probabilities. I didn't care about any of that. I have one life and I'm going to make it the best one possible.
Come on, Hesdie. For I'm trying to tell you, it's so encouraging. It's encouraging, and it needs to be said, because the truth of the matter is, I talk about how my biggest passion and frustration is underestimation, right? Bullying, kind of. But one, we get underestimated by others, and you spoke to that. And I don't want people to get lost and say, well, I don't hear, a very important word, accountability, because it is there. Because one, people underestimate us, but the other thing that frustrates me is when we underestimate ourselves. Yeah. And the truth is, a lot of times, if you're a person that relates to this topic, we have to ask ourselves, how much are you underestimating yourself? How much are you telling yourself that this is talking yourself? Because sometimes, let's be honest, there are men or people or partners who will straight up tell you, I'm not going to do much for you. I'm not going I'm
Yeah.
not going to like what you want. I'm not going to give it to you. And then we have to look at ourselves and say, why did we still decide? Why
Yeah.
did we move forward? Like what was broken in me that made me feel like that this is where, again, talking about values, that my floor was so low. Like
Yeah.
what was it in me that felt like that this was tolerable? What was it in me that said I'm going to commit to, you know, this person and expose myself and make myself vulnerable in ways that now it's like, you know, a child, I'm talking about children, but there are other things. That's a lifelong connection with
Yeah.
someone who is not healthy and not good for you. Like what was it in you that made you underestimate yourself? Right.
Mhm.
And so you're saying very important things in terms of we have to arrive at that place with ourselves to understand that I am worthy. That's kind of one of the what I said in the description of this episode. Like, is one thing to receive these things, but you have to get to a place where you feel like you're worthy of it. And I think that's why I kind of asked you, what made you want to be a better parent and woman, not wife yet, because I think you made those conscious decisions to be a better parent and to be a better woman, which would set you up to be an amazing wife. And so I wanted to ask you, like, again, that word accountability, there must have been like with, you know how they say with great risk there's great reward. So you took a risk, like, you know what I mean, on love, maybe initially when it came to your first relationship with, well, or not first relationship, but your relationship with Charlie's father. You took a risk when even with becoming a mom. You took a risk with leaving that relationship. You took a risk on Mac, on your caramel man, and having a relationship and introducing a step parent to your child. But there was a lot of great reward in that. But those decisions, they're on you, right? And they're not only on you, you're thinking about how they're impacting you and how they're impacting Charlie at that time. But you know, now you also have your second child. So each step along the way requires accountability. In what ways did you find yourself taking accountability at each of those stages? That relationship and breakup, with finding love again, and in marriage, how have you needed to take accountability?
So for me, I don't know if it was me taking accountability, but I'm so hard on myself. And
No.
I let myself down. And it's like when things initially, I got pregnant, I said, okay, I can make it work. We're going to build this nuclear family and it's going to be perfect. And when that did not work, I felt that it was my fault because why, you didn't make a good decision. You didn't think this through. So, and I think that right there, that has been, I guess, how I keep myself accountable. I never
Mm-hmm.
want to bring myself back to that space where,
Wow.
I'm so disappointed in myself that physically I can feel the weight of that, so with, I was very meticulous with deciding, who I wanted to raise Charlie with. I think it was important for me to be with a black man. I wanted him to have a positive black male role model. Number one, I needed someone who was not just good for me. He had to be good for Charlie. So, we got to strategically see how we're going to line that up. Um, everything it's like, it's always a strategy, that,
Yeah.
and it's always going back to, like, don't ever let yourself down like that again. Like,
Mm.
don't you ever put yourself in that position to where, you're not considering all options. You're not, weighing the risk. You're not weighing the benefits. You're just out here just bippity bopping through life. Like, don't, because when life hit, it really hit like a sack of bricks. I mean, prior to, getting pregnant, I think that was the paradigm shift for me was getting pregnant. I was just out here just living life. You're young, you're attractive, you're just,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
I love the confidence. She said, you said arrogance earlier, but I think it was just confidence. And she's talking about, you're young, you're attractive. Speaking about myself here,
yeah.
the body was bodying.
Yeah, body was buying, like, and I've always had that,
Somebody had to see it.
I
Okay.
had to see it. So, but then, when that happened and I began to have insecurities I never knew I could have,
Yeah.
it created one insecurity and
Yeah.
that insecurity. And I just started meeting versions of myself. I'm like, it's like an identity crisis. I'm like, I don't know who I am. Like, I don't know where to rest. Like I don't know where my foundation is. And so it's like this rebuilding and like rebuilding my confidence. And even though I don't think I ever gave signs of that, because when I feel my worst, I look my absolute best. So I always tell people misery looks good on me. Because what you won't know, you won't know if I'm falling apart. You will, because I will be the best. Yes, hair is done, everything's in place, because it again, it creates that guard, but having to rebuild myself, um that's how I hold myself accountable. Like, you can't let yourself down like that again, like not in that way. Not to say I've had failures since, I've had things not work out the way I thought they would, but I think this time around, learning from that, I really do try my best to really think before I just go out, just, make decisions and stuff like that.
I love that. In our identity episode, because you talked about it felt like an identity crisis, because essentially that's what happens. We talked about how sometimes there are portions that are us, and there are portions that are like traits that we pick up along the way, particularly when in response to injury, into different traumas. And a lot of what you described, like even if you don't feel that way, for somebody else, it's definitely qualifies as trauma. Like it really just depends on the person, because we can't say only this type of situation is traumatizing, because there are people who go through things and that's traumatizing for them for various reasons. So I think if it's not trauma for you, it may be, and I could wholeheartedly understand. I could just imagine that so many of the scenarios you've described are traumatic for people, and then they create scabs and wounds, and then we start picking up these traits, and like you said, you don't recognize yourself because it may not be yourself. And so it takes time, and it takes healing, it takes therapy, it takes so much, but time is a big part of it. But not just time, our environment, which we talked about, and surrounding yourself, as we said, with people who are going to help you produce a you that is you. And also people that see you when you don't see yourself, right? That's just so important. Like for people that say, I see you, and I don't know, I'm sure you thought about this, but just knowing that, you and Mac knew each other since younger, I'm sure that he probably had times I could just, I'll imagine that he had times like, I know you know what I mean? Like, and to see you possibly go through those different changes. And I'm sure he had his life changes or life things that he was going through. But I think it sounds to me that almost he was able to recognize who you are through all those scabs. And I could just imagine how safe that feels, and how healing that feels. And that's probably why he was able to love you back to you, right? To see you, because he saw you and say, like, I know Hesdie, like this is something else, like, you know what I mean? Like, and let me bring you on back.
Yeah.
That's a blessing.
That is a blessing. I like that. Love you back to you. Yes.
Yes. I love that. All right. So I have held you hostage, but
it's all right.
I'll ask these last couple questions in terms of, so I think we kind of talked about this, but I feel like emotional intelligence plays a role in all of this, because it's the only thing that's going to help you respond well, in all the things, and all the naysayers, and all the, whether it be people, from your side or his side, or strangers, or just people that, sometimes it's not even that people are being malicious. Sometimes people just have low expectations for you because they have low expectations for themselves. And they're like, that in my world, you don't find a good man after you had a child. In my world, this is not how it happens. Like, you know what I mean? So how did emotional intelligence, like you just being aware of your emotions and you being aware of your responses, how did that play a role throughout all the naysaying and any negativity? And if there wasn't naysaying, but just any negativity or challenges you guys have faced as a couple and family?
I don't know when I realized that I was emotionally intelligent. For me, it was more so I just kept my eyes focused on the future. I'm like, I just have to keep my eyes focused on the future, because there were times that, the things that were said, it was just like really, really, really bad.
Mm.
And I don't even know if emotional intelligence could have helped me in that point because I wanted to be really angry. But
Mm.
just maybe God, I don't know, that there was just something inside that just kept saying, just hold on a little bit longer,
Mm.
it's going to get better. And over time, with reading and, I Google everything. Why am I sad today? And I want to read what everybody else posts on Google about why they're sad so that I can try to find the one that might help me understand what
Wow.
that would be. But it took a while for me to really accept and grasp onto the concept of emotional intelligence. Now, when I look back, I'm like, wow, Hesdie, you really were onto something. Like you were really emotionally
Yes.
intelligent, especially with the way I went about certain things, the way I thought through. But at the time, it just felt like I was just trying to survive.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to make it stop. I wanted the pain to stop. I wanted, I wanted to be left alone. But I just felt that, the easiest way to dig myself out was to what I thought was strategy at the point was really just emotional intelligence. And I kind of just came to that conclusion now. But, so without knowing it, yeah, emotional intelligence was pretty much what carried me through. But at the
Wow.
time, I thought it was just strategy.
Wow. And that is emotional intelligence, like you're saying, and so much strategy, whether like reading is a great strategy, journaling, you just tapping into like just allowing yourself to feel, like realizing I feel angry. So that's what I'm just pinpointing that emotion. People can't do that all the time. And this is great strategy that I hope people are picking up. And I love that you Googled why am I sad to sometimes we don't have the verbiage, right? Like in terms of what we're feeling until you hear somebody express it in a way you're like that one that was what I was trying to say. So
Yes.
I love that. And you just saying you wanted the pain to stop because I often talk about like how willpower, we always talk about willpower, but you got to have why power because why power is greater than willpower. Like willpower is is like the strength too, right? But we don't always have that. Like sometimes you could feel defeated, but if you have and view your why, and even if the why, like we're not honest enough with ourselves, Hesdie. Like, so your why was I just don't want to hurt. Like I want the pain to stop. And and recognizing too, like because sometimes we can want the pain to stop and do things that are not helpful, like
Yes.
addictive things or other things that's just going to create a whole nother issue. Like, you know what I mean? A whole nother drama. But you kept in mind, well, that's going to hurt me too down the line. And so I want the pain to stop and I want it to stop in a way that's permanent and that's helpful and that's going to set me up and where I don't have to hurt like this again. I just think that's amazing. So are you a different person now?
Yes and no. Like,
Okay.
I love the essence of who I am.
Yes.
I'm silly. I use humor in the good and the bad situations. And, I have this it's going to be okay attitude. And I think that's just the core of who I am. And I'm very happy that God created me that way. I've gotten wiser,
Mm-hmm.
calmer. And when you argue with kids every day, you gotta save your energy for later. Like I can't I can't go to work and get involved, or I can't even spend time arguing with Matt because guess what? These kids are coming, so what are we gonna do when they come? And they will.
How
So
is drain you in the
they
most
will.
loving way, but
So me knowing that, I don't have unlimited energy. And that meaning, especially with my mental energy, I learned that the hard way. Like I had to go through a pretty, severe depressive episode for me to realize that I'm not a giant, that I do fall.
mm,
And I think that was probably that last piece that really made me just kind of tie it all in together. Like, okay, you know what? Everything can't be a thing.
mm-hmm,
Um, the parts of you that serve you best, nurture them. And the parts of you that could potentially lead to you meeting parts of you that you never want to see again,
mm-hmm.
find ways to either dispose of them or make peace with them.
Come on.
Yeah. And so I've grown in that aspect that, now I'm just like an older, more mature version of that super silly 16-year-old Hesdie. And I love that for me. Like I'm cool with it. I'm vibing with
Yeah,
it. But
I love it.
yeah, I'm still the same Hesdy, but I just, you just life will learn you. You know how they say life
Yeah,
will learn you. Life don't learn me. And now that I'm blessed to be able to help my kid through teenagers, because like my teenagers, those are the years I always wish I could go back and parent myself.
mm,
I feel like I have that opportunity, and I'm just so excited to be able to be the parent that I kind of needed when I was a teenager to someone whose attitude reminds me of myself, very smart mouth and knows everything. I'm like,
right.
this is great-ish. But
Yes,
same Hezzy, just I'm older.
I
Yeah.
love it. And that is evolution. Like is this it's us, but
Yeah.
it's a version of us that's inside that we just haven't released yet.
Mhm.
And so that's why we tack on these wisdoms and intelligences to become a version of us that's just a better sane. I love
Balance.
that. Yes, very balanced. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I love that because sometimes when you go through things in order to be a resource for someone else, and a lot of what you went through, even though in the moments it's like, oh, why, you know what I mean, and it gave you Charlie, but now, like you're saying, it prepared you to parent him for all the same things, like not the same things, but like a lot of the personality and a
Yeah.
lot of the attitude and a lot of the I love that. So I feel like I know the answer to this one, but when people say that men don't marry women with children, what do you say to those people?
Yes, they do. And they happy too.
Period. Yes, and they happy too. Yeah. That's the answer I wanted, and I love it. Yes. And so to close us out, Hezzy, I can't thank you enough, but I wanted to ask if there's any final advice that you would have for anyone that is currently in love, in parenting, or in marriage. What would that be?
My advice would be connect with like-minded people, be teachable, and you're not always right.
Mm,
Yeah. I'm
I
probably
love
saying
that.
that to myself. That last one, it's probably more like a note to self, but each one teach one.
Each one, teach one. I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, guys, you have heard it here first. Hezzy, I cannot thank you enough. Where can the people find you? Because like I said, you're so insightful. You always have just amazing posts, amazing writings, just amazing shares. You just really dope. I remember yeah, when you had first dropped your podcast, I was listening to your episodes like, she's so good at this. I just remember listening to your podcast and just saying, wow, Hezzy, this is great choice. Like even just the OkHezday and just yeah, your personality, everything just spot on. So I know the people want to know where to find you. What are your handles and where can they find you?
Okay, so before we get to that, since we're like in the business of giving flowers, I really want you to know the reason why I chose Drexel Ace was because of you.
What?
100%.
Got the Macaulay Culkin face again.
But I remember, I don't know if you already were married or whatever. We were in the church for whatever reason. Maybe you had finished already and you were walking down, yeah, because you were in blue. You were in blue scrubs. And it was at the time I was really trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I heard you saying, something about the Drexel Ace program. And I don't know who you were talking to, but I remember you saying it. And I would always look, because I always admired you so much. And I love that, you were getting married or were already married. Like you and Rico had such a chill. His personality kind of reminds me of Meg, very chill.
Yes,
So, and
very.
I
He's
said, you know
he's
what?
amazing. I
And
get on him a lot, but he's amazing. Yeah.
I just admired that. I said, you know what? I said, I'm going to be like that girl. I'm going to Drexel Ace. And yeah, girl,
Wow.
full circle moment, right?
That is such a full circle moment because we need another part two on this because no, that's such a full circle moment. I thank you for sharing that. Just because I don't know, like I love confident people. I think the reason why I flock to confident people is because I struggle with confidence so much. And I think people will see me do things or just like but I'm a person who's very focused. And
Mhm.
so I on the outside, I look like everything's okay and I'm 100% confident. But inside, I mean, the conversations that Kim is having with Kim is just like, it's like 50 versions in there that's just like, well, we should. And it just always, I think one of the reasons why I try to, or I like when I can help others is because I know that in so many ways, I didn't always feel like I had people I could go to, or I struggled with that because I didn't want to be a burden on people. That was really the reason. Like there could have been times I didn't have people, but really it was just that I didn't like to be or want to be a burden. It became a big thing for me in my like identity issues. And so I would just work out big issues, like big problems by myself, and then beat myself up when it didn't always go right. And sometimes it did go right. And so when people would be like, oh, Kim, anybody who says that, sometimes I'm floored. I think because I know all the
inner workings.
Yes, the inner workings and the exhaustion that sometimes I felt, and sometimes just the pride, like, okay, let me give myself a pat on the back. You did okay. Right. But just sometimes just taking myself through things that I felt like that I learned as I got older. You didn't have to do that alone. Exactly. And yeah, that was really hard. And it still is sometimes when I think about it. But you saying that as someone who I've always looked to, like I always admire people who don't let adversity stop them. And another part for me was just like, I don't know, like again with that love issues and identity issues and maybe issues like when, growing up a single parent home, I always felt like mistakes would cost me love. Like I always felt like I couldn't really make mistakes. And so when I see people like you who are like, yeah, I made a mistake, like, or like you just saying, I just when I say I get on a high, like you just say my reproductive organs work, and what I get like, I'm cheesing because I'm like, I love this person because it just shows me, I think you loved yourself in a way that I don't know that I would have been able to do for myself. And like if I went through certain things like that, and you just, I don't know, I've always looked at you, like I said, like this girl, she's got style, she's got flair. She was there.
The nanny named Hesdie.
Like, yeah, I'm so crazy. I know my brain is crazy, but honestly, Hesdie, like this is how I've seen you for quite some time. So you saying that, okay, I'm gonna go cry. I'm gonna go cry somewhere.
No, but
I'm glad.
What? You never know. You never know who's looking at you, and you never know why they're looking at you. And one thing I will say before we make this another 3-hour podcast,
child,
I claim my flaws before anyone else can. So before you can throw it in my face that this happened or that happened, I will share it for you. I will own that. I will own my narrative. So I never want anyone to feel that they can use my flaws or my shortcomings as a way to cut me down. So by me being transparent, what can you say? I've already said it. If anything, I can add more detail to it than you can. So that is, I fight back. Like I own every aspect of my story. So there's very little that anyone could share about me that I might say, oh, you forgot that part.
Oh my God.
That's how I fight back. And I do sometimes I'll share and I'll go to my husband. I'm like, child, you think I was oversharing? You think I was oversharing? Like I'll have these attacks, and then I get the inboxes. Oh my gosh, Chelsea, thank you so much. But
girl,
that's how I fight back. I fight back by just owning my narrative.
Oh, this is how I fight back. I own it first. And you own that. You own that. And it's like, yeah, like I'm going to get better. Like, don't worry. I'm going to own this and I'm going to remix this and improve on this. And that's the best revenge. And it's not about, I'm using the word revenge, but that's a come up when you take your stuff, when you take the things that you own your stuff and you improve.
Yep.
I love that.
Okay, so where can people find me? So I post a lot on my Instagram stories. It's like the most random roller coaster ride you'll ever be on. But it's always fun. There's always the story behind it. So I'm okay, like okay, HEZDAY, OkHezday, on everything. So if you want to link up, I love sharing my stories. I love sharing my my outlook on life. Primarily just talking about parenting, relationships, and my kids.
Yes.
And that's pretty much it. And OkHezday is just a play on my name Hesdie because people always messing up my name. So why not OkHezday? So yeah, that's where you can find me.
I love that. Well, folks, go find her because she will get you right. Clearly, Shantae's got a man at home, and Shantae is good to that man.
Oh, who is Shantae?
Shantae's got a
No.
man.
No.
You don't know that song?
No.
How? You about to get your black card revoked. Okay, that's R&B.
There's so many other songs I know.
Shantae Moore. Okay.
Oh,
That's why I keep. She's like, who is Shantae? Does she not know his name? Shantae.
No. I'm like, is Shantae listening now? Shantae, how you doing?
I'm gonna send you the song, okay, and play it every time is you and Mr. Caramel Man date night. Okay, so Shantae's got a man at home, and he's so good to me. Okay, that's what the song said.
Okay, I got
and she said, "I'm sorry that your man ain't home." Okay, she go in. Okay,
oh, Shantae's going in.
Yeah, Shantae's going in. So I'm just saying, Shantae, as in you, as a Hesdie,
I'm
got a
here
man
for
at
it.
home. Okay,
I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
So if you need some help on how to keep that man happy, on how to just remain a balanced individual, how on parenting tips, parenting hacks, like I said, this podcast is all about strategy. Who can we look at who leads themselves well? And then we can say, I want you to influence me in that area. So if you're looking for someone to influence you in the areas of love, parenting, and marriage, Hesdie, OkHezday is your girl. Hesdie, thank you so much. I appreciate you for being here.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun. And the fact that I was like threatening my family via text message to stay upstairs, this was worth it.
Oh, yes, I love it. Thank you, guys. Thank you, listeners.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Hey guys, thank you so much for rocking out with us in this episode. Listen, if you are feeling we all go forward, I ask of you, subscribe. I don't want you to miss whenever our episodes drop. Also, remember, as we move in the right direction, that is forward and progressing, never stagnant, we become a resource to help others move in the right direction as well. And the cycle continues, but only if we move. If you go and I go, then we all go forward. Let's get moving.